Right, guys, let's now move on with our sessions, and this time take a look at how to troubleshoot interfaces. We will start with a quick discussion on some of the common issues for interface problems, and then take a look at the different troubleshooting tools on both the GUI and the command line. Probably the most common issue we can see with interfaces is going to be the link up-down problems. And now in terms of copper interfaces, such as Ethernet ports, the first thing you would want to take a look at would be to make sure that the LAD that is associated with the interface is a solid green, because solid green means that the interface is up and that there is a connection with the other side of the link. Now, if the interface is down, I would, if the LAD is not green, I would first and foremost take a look at the cable itself. Like, make sure that the distance specification, the distance for the cable meets the specification. I would possibly replace the cable, or maybe even try to use a different port on the patch panel interface if you use one. So basic stuff, like first and foremost, make sure you've got the power on the device, then play with the cable, take a look at the patch panel connections. Really simple things. In most cases, they will help you solve the problem. Another good one is going to be to take a look at speed and duplex settings. So typically this is what you want to negotiate with the other end, but possibly you could also hard code these settings. So for both speed and duplex, and you would want to make sure that they are set to the same values on both sides of the link. Okay, if all of this stuff doesn't help, I would quickly take a look at the other side of the connection, the other device, the other interface, or even try to use a single cable to loop two interfaces on the device that you troubleshoot in the first place. So kind of like try to loop the connection, see if the interfaces come up with a short cable to roll out cable and interface issues on a single system. Okay, for fiber connections, in this case, I would take a look at the fiber interface to make sure that it is clean. I would check the cable, and probably the best troubleshooting tool that we have in this case specific to fiber interfaces is going to be to use the show transceiver command. So in this case, we want to take a look at stuff like power levels, like the voltage, the current. We want to take a look at the temperature. So all of this stuff you will be able to see with the show transceiver detail command. Now for interfaces in general, we will want to take a look at the GUI as probably the fastest way to troubleshoot interface problems. So this is going to be simple network interfaces output, which is going to quickly give you information about the status of the interfaces, link status, link state. It is going to quickly tell you what is the interface type for a given interface, what is the IP address, a virtual router instance, what is the possibly a sub interface configuration, such as virtual wire versus maybe a VLAN, and what is the security zone. Okay, obviously you could also take a look at the interface to check the settings manually, moving between the tabs one by one, and making sure that everything is configured as you expected. Okay, another place on the GUI we would possibly want to visit would be the system logs. So in this case, maybe let's go ahead and do something like this. Now let's quickly go to the topology here, and let's try to shut down one of the data interfaces. I'm going to emulate a interface problem with the suspend link option. We could basically shut the interface on the other side of the cable if you want to take a look at that on your side, but obviously not in production. A quick reminder, you guys don't forget to subscribe to our website's newsletter and YouTube channel for the latest updates on products, industry news, and promotions. Thanks. And then if we take a look at network interfaces once again, we will want to refresh the output here, and we should see that it is going to immediately tell us about a link problem. It says that the link state is now down. So this configured, interface is configured, but the link is down. So we can take a look at the system logs as well. Let's move to monitor, and then logs down to system, and we will see the information about the event is called a link change for Ethernet 1/1. It says the state of the link for this interface basically changed. This is all about Ethernet 1/1. And then we also see information about some routing problems. It says that the OSPF adjacency that was established built out of this interface is also down. So these log messages, another place what you would want to visit if you're having some issues with the interfaces. Okay, so interface was up and it is now down. Maybe before we bring it up, let's also quickly take a look at some of the command line options, and I want to start with show interface hardware. Okay, let's take a look at that on the CLI. Show interface hardware. Show interface hardware is going to quickly show you the most important information about the interfaces. It's going to give you a nice summary of the interfaces, data plane interfaces, and we see that it says that for Ethernet 1/1, which uses this MAC address, we've got a problem because the interface is down, and because of that, the speed and duplex is unknown. So interface is down, it's not able to negotiate speed and duplex settings, as opposed to the other interface, which is told to be running at 1 gig for speed, and the duplex is full, interface is up. Show interface hardware. Now obviously if we bring the interface up again, so I'm going to unsuspend, I'm going to resume this link, and we will issue this command once again, we see that everything is now back to normal. And we should see the same on the GUI. Let's refresh log messages. So this time it says that the interface Ethernet 1/1 is up again, and at some point we will also see the information about the OSPF adjacency. You go back to network interfaces for Ethernet, we see that everything is fine. Other interface types you would want to visit: VLAN, loopback tunnel, SD-WAN, depending on what type of interfaces obviously you configured on the system. Show interface is going to be a place to go on the command line. We've got the management option available that is specific to the management interface. So if you have a problem with the management port, you would want to issue the show interface management command to take a look at this. That type of this interface and related problems, versus if you want to take a look at the data ports, you could either use the show interface hardware, show interface logical, which we will take a look at in just a second, or basically say show interface and specify the interface name, which is going to give you a lot of different details on a given data port. So maybe let's also quickly take a look at this. I'm going to say show interface logical, and this one is going to give us a nice breakdown of the data interfaces, including their identifiers and the information about the virtual system, which in my case is just one. It is going to give us the information about the zone that is associated with a given interface. It is going to tell us what virtual router we configured for the port, what is the tag associated with the interface if we configured one, and what is the configured IP address on that port. So some more information than show interface hardware. Show interface hardware is more for the speed duplex state verification. It also gives you MAC addresses, versus logical is for zone, virtual router, and IP addresses. Now, maybe before we take a look at the show interface for a specific port, let's also take a look at the counters, global counters, and also counters for the interface. We will start with the interface counters. This is going to be show counter interface. For the management interface, let's start with this. So this is going to be show counter interface management. Excuse me, show, what's the command syntax here? It's a show counter interface, not show interface counter. Show counter interface management. In this case, it is telling us, giving us information about the bytes or packets received or transmitted out of the management port. So really good tool. Those counters are really a good place to start troubleshooting, because you always want to think about the interface, assuming that the interface is up. You always want to think about both directions of the communication. So first and foremost, am I getting packets from the network? And second is, am I sending packets out of the interface to the network? The counters is something that will help you with that, and they will also tell you, give you information about some possible errors or problems with packet processing, which is going to be this portion here, and the information about packets that are dropped, plus multicast packets received. Show counter interface. Let's take a look at 1/1. We've got similar stuff. The difference in the output is that our X option means that we talk about packets received, or just bytes received, versus TX is for transmitted. Transmitted packets or just transmitted bytes. Okay, so we've got a breakdown for unicast, multicast, and broadcast packets, and this is at the port level, physical port counters. There is also a breakdown for the interface counters from the CPU perspective, and logical interface counters from the CPU perspective. Hardware interface counters, this is actually pretty similar to what we see at the port level, versus for the logical counters we got some more, because it also gives us information about some problems associated with related to the interface, like forwarding errors, like routing problems, no route for a destination out of the port, like ARP issues, neighbor adjacency problems, and information about different types of attacks that could be targeted at a given interface, including spoofing, ICMP fragmentation, encapsulation, decapsulation, and layer 2, and then TCP, UDP, and other protocol connections per second. Let's now take a look at, let's go back one step, and let's now take a look at the interface, show interface command for the management interface and the data port. So if I were to say show interface management, this is the command you want to use to troubleshoot, to get as much as you can, as much details as you can for the management interface when you troubleshoot it. So this output here, it tells us about the link status of the management interface. So the same output as what we saw previously. We've got the speed negotiated. We've got the configured. First and foremost, we've got the configured speed, duplex, and state, which is all auto in this case. And then this first line here, it's for what is being used by the interface, so the active settings. 1000 max for speed, full duplex, interfaces app. First and foremost, you want to take a look at this information here, this value, which is whether the port is up or down. You've got the information about the MAC of the interface, IP address, network mask, default gateway for the management port, the same stuff for IP version 6. And then we've got the counters for this interface, like in the previous outputs, what we saw for data interface or the management interface with the other command. Okay, so more information that's going to tell us for a physical interface. Let's go for Ethernet 1/1, for instance. We are still with this I'm going to issue this command once again. Show interface Ethernet 1/1. So this is basically the same stuff as what we saw for the management port. This is the active or just negotiated values. We see that the port is up. This is configured stuff. We've got the MAC address. We've got the operation mode, which in this case is layer 3. Then we've got the interface name, its identifier, sub-interface information, operation mode, the layer 3, virtual router is default, IP address. It even tells us some about the services configured, like we see that this one runs OSPF. Okay, some TCP information. This is the zone, security zone, and some other information like virtual system, TCP settings for the interface, stuff like that. And down the bottom, we've got the information that we've already seen with the show counters command, the port level statistics, the statistics from the CPU perspective for the hardware and for the logical descriptions. Pretty much the last command that I wanted to show you is a show counter global command. Okay, so show counter global is something that is going to show you the information about statistics for the different categories and so-called aspects of the connections, features, and protocols that you can see, you can check on the firewall, but it is going to show you a collective aggregate information for all interfaces or processes and all features configured kind of like at once. So it's actually pretty hard to read through this command, especially that it contains a lot of different options. And there is not really a good source that you could use to figure out exactly what those different aspects and categories mean. So I would use it as the probably as the last resort when I troubleshoot, but it's at the end of the day, it's still good to know that such command exists and to be familiar with its output. Let's take a look at it as well. Show counter global. Maybe let's just start with this, show counter global. So we see that it gives us the information about the different things that it measures, like packet received. Notice that it also breaks down the whole output based on the severity, category, and the aspect. So this is how we will basically filter for this output to narrow down the scope of the information we want to see. Each counter that it displays is also described, so they give you a hint what a given counter is, what it measures. And again, they give you the information about the severity of a counter, about the category for a given counter, and about the so-called aspect. As you can tell, now in this case it shows 57, but if we take a look at show counter global and say name, this is all possible counters that you can see on the system, which is a huge number here. And notice that they are named based on the naming structure is it's kind of like hierarchical, because it starts with I believe this is a category. We will double check in just a second. So we saw counters starting with cluster. Now we see a bunch of CTD counters. If we scroll down, we've got some DFA. We've got flow counters, which is going to be packet processing related stuff. If you want to figure out what those different actually mean, I would start with the category. So I would say show counter global. Then you have to use the filter option, and let's say category and then question mark. So this command, show counter global filter category, is actually giving a description of the different categories, which is, as I said, the strings or just the words the individual counters start with. If we are concerned with the flow counters, we want to take a look at these. Flow, it says, is for packet processing. The CTD is for content identification. Content ID. We've got memory related counters. We've got packet buffer stuff, a NAT, app ID, application identification, SSL, SSH, session. So a lot of different counters that are associated with different features and technologies on PanOS. And there is also the aspect option that is basically more specific. A breakdown, or basically breakdown based on other context for the counters, like IPsec specific counters, fragmentation specific, packet forwarding, ARP, hardware offload, netflow, and so on. So for instance, if you wanted to take a look at, let's say, drop counters, let's leave the categories and aspect because there isn't really going to be a lot of them. We've got just 7 here. It is going to give information about 802.1q problems, invalid interface, no ARP, entry, session denied. If we take a look at error is actually pretty similar. But if we take a look at information, we've got some more here. Okay, so it's like with syslog, when you say info, it's gonna show you all of the counters from the info level plus levels below, which is gonna be error and drop. Okay, I believe you could also use the show counter global command and just say match, let's say, app ID. So this is another thing you could use if you go for this output. But in general, show counter global filter severity, let's say warning, plus you could also mix, you can add a category or at least an aspect you want to look at. So a few different ways. Let's take a look at show counter global failure severity warn aspect resource. Maybe change the information. So a few different ways as how you can take a look at these. Just remember that this is for all interfaces and all processes on the device. And now there is actually just one more option that you probably want to use, which is the delta keyword. The delta keyword is going to show you the output change since the last time the command was issued. Now let me take a look at the syntax here. Show counter global severity, let's say info, a delta, category, okay, let's just take a look at this output. Show counter global failure severity info category packet, and let's see if we can take a look at the delta. I just need to say delta yes. This is gonna tell you about the change, from the last time the command was issued, which is basically from the last read. For instance, we've got 8 packets received globally on all interfaces. When I issue this command once again and one more time, it says the last sampling time was 20 seconds ago. This was the second time I issued the command versus the third time it was just 3 seconds, and this is the differences since the last read.